There is a morning prayer so old that most traditions no longer remember where it began. Not a prayer for comfort, not a prayer for patience, a prayer designed with deliberate intention to attract wealth, to open the day in a way that ancient teachers believed created the conditions for prosperity to enter and for poverty to find no foothold. What you are about to hear is this prayer. A wealth prayer practiced quietly by certain traditions for centuries and almost never taught outside of them. Stay until the end. Most people have never encountered an ancient prayer like this one. Not because it was hidden, because it required something modern mornings rarely offer. The willingness to treat the first moment of the day as the most important financial decision you will make before noon. This is a prayer for abundance, and it was never meant to be a private possession of the few who inherited it. It was meant to be practiced every morning before the noise arrived. Across centuries and across cultures that had no contact with each other, the same understanding appeared, that the first words spoken in the morning were not neutral, that a prosperity prayer spoken at the threshold of waking carried a different weight than the same words spoken at any other hour, that the mind, in its first moments of consciousness, was unusually receptive, and that what entered it first shaped everything that followed, including what the day would ultimately produce. Jewish households preserved specific morning declarations spoken before the feet touched the floor. Vedic tradition prescribed dawn invocations timed to the exact quality of early light. Monastic orders, among the most financially disciplined communities of their era, built their entire daily structure around a morning office that functioned, in practical terms, as a financial prayer. A deliberate alignment of the self before the world made its demands. These were not superstitions of the poor or the desperate. They were disciplines of those who understood something that modern mornings have quietly forgotten, that prosperity is not only built during the day, it is prepared before the day begins. This is not something that was widely written down. It survived because certain people chose to keep it alive. If you are willing, the elder is ready to speak. Every tradition that took prosperity seriously also took mornings seriously, not as a coincidence, as a principle. The ancient world did not divide time the way we do, into hours that are more or less interchangeable, each one equally available for whatever happens to demand attention. Certain hours carried different weight, and the hour of waking was considered by many traditions to be the most charged of all. In Jewish mystical thought, the soul was understood to partially depart during sleep, returning at the moment of waking. The first act upon return was acknowledgement. Modeh ani, I give thanks, spoken immediately, before anything else, before standing, before checking what the day required. The Modeh ani functioned in the most practical sense as an ancient prayer of abundance, not because of what it asked for, but because of what it refused to assume. Gratitude, in the tradition of those who built generational wealth across difficult centuries, was not a soft virtue. It was a discipline, a correction against the entitlement that quietly destroys prosperity. Vedic teaching placed similar weight on the Brahma Muhurta, the hour before dawn. Practitioners did not stumble into this hour. They met it with intention, naming the elements, earth, water, light, space, acknowledging the conditions that made life and work possible before asking anything of the day. An act of alignment, of placing oneself consciously inside a larger order before attempting to act within it. The monastic morning office added a third layer, the naming of purpose. The monk did not simply wake grateful. He woke knowing what he was for, before the demands of the day could distort his attention. Purpose, in these traditions, was not motivational language. It was protective. A person who knows clearly what they are building is harder to distract, harder to drain. Three elements then repeated across traditions separated by geography, language, and belief: gratitude, alignment, purpose. Every genuine prayer for abundance preserved across centuries carried at least one of these. The most powerful ones carried all three. A morning prayer spoken at that threshold, before the mind had been claimed by anything else, was understood to do something that no prayer spoken later in the day could fully replicate. It was the first act of someone who intended to attract wealth, not merely hope for it. And once you understand that, you cannot unknow it. There is a pattern so common it has become invisible. The alarm sounds. The hand reaches for the phone before the eyes are fully open. Within 60 seconds, the mind is already inside someone else's agenda. Notifications, headlines, problems that have been waiting with patience for exactly this moment of vulnerability. The ancient teachers would not have called this laziness. They would have called it something more precise: the surrendering of the threshold. The distracted household, the one with no prosperity prayer, no financial prayer, no conscious opening of the day, was described by the elder traditions with quiet concern. Not because it was poor, because it was unguarded at the moment that mattered most. The person who wakes already behind, already resentful, already bracing, moves through the day in a particular way. Decisions made from anxiety rarely serve long-term accumulation. The posture of scarcity, worn from the first moment of waking, tends to produce outcomes that confirm itself. A house left open at its most vulnerable hour is not protected by the strength of its walls. The threshold is where entry happens, for prosperity and for everything that quietly works against it. That is why this prosperity prayer, this specific, structured, ancient morning practice, remained for centuries in the hands of the few, not as a secret, as a discipline that most people were never still enough to receive. What follows is not a reconstruction. It is not a translation. It is a synthesis, drawn from the structural principles that the elder traditions held in common, shaped into a form that can be spoken every morning by anyone willing to treat the threshold hour with the seriousness it deserves. It contains three movements, as the ancient practices did: gratitude, alignment, and the naming of purpose. This is the wealth prayer in its complete form. Not a fragment, not a summary, but the full practice. Spoken in sequence, spoken before the phone, before the news, before the first demand of the day arrives. Speak it quietly or speak it aloud, but speak it with full attention, because attention is precisely what these words were designed to carry. I am grateful for this return, for the breath that came back without my asking, for the day that has been given before I have done anything to deserve it. I do not take this as ordinary. I receive it as it is, a gift extended once more. I place myself at this threshold inside the order that is larger than my plans. I am not the source of what sustains me. I am a steward, a builder, a keeper of what has been entrusted. Let me move today with the clarity of someone who knows the difference. This is what I am building, not only for myself, for what comes after me. Let my words today serve it. Let my decisions protect it. Let nothing I do this day quietly work against what I'm trying to create. I enter this day with open hands and a clear direction. What is mine to receive, let it come. What is mine to protect, let me guard it well. What is mine to build, let me begin. That is the prayer. A morning prayer for abundance that has outlasted empires, survived the collapse of the traditions that carried it, and arrived here, to this moment, because certain people refused to let it disappear. Not long, not complicated. No rare words, no elaborate ritual, no specific tradition required to carry it. What it requires is the one thing most mornings do not offer: stillness. A moment of conscious pause before the world begins its pull. The deliberate choice to enter the day rather than be swept into it. The morning prayer was never separate from the wealth. It was part of how the wealth was held. The threshold hour is yours every morning. It arrives without asking. It waits, briefly, for what you will do with it. Most people hand it away before they are fully awake. The elder's final word is simple. Prosperity has always rewarded those who treat the beginning of things with care, not with intensity, not with ambition. With care, through the merchant who, regardless of what the previous day had cost him, returned to his financial prayer the next morning without hesitation, through the grandmother who spoke her words in the quiet before dawn, through every person who understood that the morning prayer was not a ritual of the successful. It was how certain people became successful and stayed that way. Begin tomorrow differently. Speak the words. Hold the stillness. What you are building deserves that much. And this morning prayer, spoken with intention every day, may be the quietest and most consequential decision you make toward attracting the wealth you are working to create.